mechanistic concept, application of mechanistic concept to life. The application of mechanistic concept to life which is cause and effect. So life and cause and effects what you mean is mechanistic concept of, but life as we saw is something organic, and it requires organic concepts, or at least organic concept of cause and effect, some sort of teleology where whole is more than parts, etc., what we have been looking at. Okay, but how does that negate objective principle of investigation, which is, let's say, truth? And if life is just like a car, cause and effect, then concept of truth doesn't emerge from within that sort of framework. This is one explanation. Another explanation would be that concept of objectivity requires, as we saw in the case of organic explanation, it is more than mechanistic conception, and that's the second way of understanding it. And the third way, you can have cause and effect. In objectivity, we are looking at or situating cause and effect in the context of reason, which is more than cause and effect, which can't be reduced to cause and effect. We're looking for reasons. So in a way, life mechanistic concepts don't fully explain our rationality. And if they don't fully explain our rationality, then they don't fully explain our conception of objectivity. So if we reduce life to mechanistic concepts, then it means that we are reducing rationality to mechanistic conception, which doesn't. So which basically rob us of the ideal of objectivity, etc., which is based on or explained by our conception of rationality or full conception of rationality. The argument is something like that, I think. Now, in this context, then he quotes Wildon Carr, and we have just trying to focus on the first sentence. If intellect is a product of evolution, intellect. And here, Allama Iqbal probably is thinking that evolution is mechanistic, product of cause and effect. Then it means intellect is product of cause and effect. So probably the argument is that if intellect is itself is a product of cause and effect, then how can it rise above or transcend that sort of thinking, which will mean that intellect is reduced to cause and effect, which means that we are robbed of objectivity. So that's how I'm reading it. On this point, I will quote it. If intellect is a product of evolution, the whole mechanistic concept of nature and the origin of life is absurd, because it cannot explain intellect. Mechanistic. And the principle which science has that must clearly be revised. Yeah. So what Iqbal is talking about is, or his objection in technical term is, epistemological circularity. Or even more than that, but let's play with this concept of epistemological circularity. So just forget about what my definition was, but then this is the new epistemological circularity. Forget about that too, but maybe Iqbal's claim is that intellect cannot be a byproduct of matter, because probably that's what science or evolution claims. I'm not sure. I mean, there might be some scientists in the 18th century who claimed that, and mostly the philosophers of science and the propagandists of science claimed that, I guess. But anyway, byproduct of matter. So now same so life is by, so this same intellect defines our understanding of matter, so in a way. So although intellect is the byproduct of matter, now we are using intellect to understand matter. So this is supposed to be some sort of epistemological circularity in a bad way. Because I don't think epistemological circularity in itself is something bad. I'm just presupposing that it's not bad always. And now Carr supposedly supports this point, this interpretation of Iqbal's, by pointing to a self-contradiction. It's actually the word he uses, self-contradiction. At the end, we have only to state it to see the self-contradiction. What is the self-contradiction according to Carr? First part is that science as a discipline, intellect is or reason is its main tool, objective tool, and through this tool it discovers laws, physical laws, and these laws are mechanistics. Laws of physics and chemistry, they're based on a certain concept of cause and effect we have been dealing with. Science claims that intellect itself is the byproduct of chemical, I guess, those same laws. So in a way it undermines, it sort of deals with undermines the very tool in this way, I think. It undermines because if you understand intellect in mechanistic terms alone, then the concept of intellect as concept of objectivity and truth, can't be sustained based on that conception of intellect. And probably we can reread, according to this understanding, the passage again. If intellect is a product of evolution, the whole mechanistic concept of nature and the origin of life is absurd, and the principles which science has adopted must clearly be revised. We have only to state it to see the self-contradiction, and here is how he stated: how can the intellect be a mode of apprehending reality? How can the intellect, a mode of apprehending reality, be itself an evolution of something which only exists as an abstraction of that mode of apprehending? Okay. That's a further explanation of what we are saying. So matter and the concept of matter, the concept of cause and effect, they are different ways of apprehending reality created by intellect itself. So how can intellect be the product of very same abstract concept it has created? So Carr is saying that intellect can't be the evolution of something. So matter, cause and effect, these are abstract concepts or concepts which intellect has created in order to understand reality. So how can intellect itself be the outcome of these abstract concepts? So the argument is that matter, atom, and mechanistic processes are not things which they are abstraction, they are mental constructs created by our intellect to make sense of sensory data. So that's true. So what he's saying is that if these are the concepts created by intellect, then it is logically absurd, or he even says self-contradictory, to say that intellect is a late stage product of these concepts. No, I mean, that's like sleight of hand, because what evolutionary biologist of that sort he is critiquing would not say that intellect is the byproduct of these concepts. What it would say is that life emerges through evolution, the evolution which also life intellect. In the same way, as life emerges from a long evolutionary process, and then intellect during that process develops certain capacities to understand the very process through which it emerges. So what's the contradiction in that? I don't understand. I mean, I do understand what he's saying, but I don't think I necessarily agree with him. It's not self-contradiction, but it's more like saying that life, intellect as we understand it, it doesn't seem to be the same thing. It seems strange that intellect would emerge from intellect can be reduced to chemical processes alone. That's what the argument should be. Not that it's some sort of self-contradiction. I don't think there's any self-contradiction as such. It's just that a chemical reduction of intellect to reduction of the explanation of intellect to chemical and physical processes doesn't seem to exhaust or even highlight the essential nature as we understand it of the intellect. And the overall argument is something which we stated last time, which is that if reason or intellect is just a survival mechanism, that's what evolution is supposed to be for Iqbal, then we don't have, that's Allama Iqbal's argument more like, no, then we don't have no objective reason to believe in its scientific laws are actually true of reality or objective. They would just be illusion for staying alive. Why illusion? If they are survival mechanisms, then they should be very real. So, but the point is well taken, that survival mechanism. But then, yeah, so what he's saying is then our higher level explanations themselves can be somehow should be understood as survival mechanism. It doesn't seem very persuasive. But then it's not necessary or to understand evolution as just survival mechanism. Therefore, so science, for science to claim that it is objective, must assume that intellect is prior to physics. That's what Iqbal's argument was. And we understand Iqbal's argument, but I don't think it's a knockout or knockdown argument, a knockout argument against mechanistic conception, because mechanistic conceptions, firstly, this is a caricature of what mechanistic conceptions are. So basically, we can sum up that Iqbal is saying that life and intellect is foundational, is spiritual, it is prior to and non-reducible to matter and mechanistic explanation. That's what Iqbal's claim. And he's bringing in Carr, who is claiming that science uses mind to prove a theory, which is mechanistic theory, that effectively prove that mind is unreliable, because then we will see that mind is just itself a cause and effect mechanism. So it cannot give us the objectivity, which seems, or truth, which seems to be something which is at least not reducible to cause and effect. Yeah. But I'm not entirely persuaded by Iqbal or Carr at this point. But we'll take this again in the next session, inshallah. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika, nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. وصلي وسلم على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا ومولانا محمد وبارك وسلم. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون. السلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. آمين.